from a relatively long break, I like to ask the students a question about their time on break. And I'll sort of explain my reasons for doing that. So we'll do a little bit of catching up for those of you that feel comfortable doing that. And then we'll discuss a little bit the schedule for 10th period for the rest of second semester. I'm gonna have you take some notes over some of the videos that we watched. I guess it would have been 2 weeks ago you watched on your own. You didn't have to watch all 4 videos, but there are a few points that I want to make sure that we all sort of draw out of them. And then I have a question that I want to ask you about the role that government should play in the funding of the arts and in the support of the arts. And so we'll have a little conversation about government and economics and budgets and funding and how all of that might be involved in the arts. So those of you with you know, opinions on such things should have a great place to voice those. Well, I don't need to share my screen yet because my first question is to you, and it's just, did anybody encounter anything that was ToK friendly during the break? Did you read anything, watch anything, listen to anything, travel anywhere, have any conversations, stumble across any interesting conversations that are ToK friendly? And by that I just mean open-ended, about knowledge in general, sort of philosophical. Abby, it looked like you might have had one.
Well, I just traveled somewhere, but now I'm not sure if this is really philosophical. Or like, okay, wait. So I went to Cedar Point, but it was very busy. And so we were there all day, but we only got to ride 4 rides. So do you think that that would be worth the money?
Oh, it's a good question. So what did you think?
I think it was worth it. I think it was still fun, even though I spent most of the time in lines.
Do you think that at this point in your life, money is a more significant constraint for you than time? So,
No,
for example, you
I'd
said,
rather have time.
yeah, I mean, you asked if it was a waste of money, but you could have also asked if it was a waste of time.
Oh, yeah. That
Do
is a
you,
good question.
yeah, because I feel like the older you get, for a variety of reasons, money becomes less of a constraint generally because you tend to be independent, you have your own job, and you tend to make more money as you get older. But time does become a huge constraint because you have so many commitments, although you guys also have lots of commitments. I'm aware of that as well. So interesting, Abby. I don't know. It's a good question. What was your favorite ride?
What? I forget what it was called, but what was the orange one called? I don't know. It was orange. It went upside down, whoop-de-doo, you know.
All right, so a roller coaster. All right.
Roller coaster stuff.
When I was your age, I was into roller coasters, not so much anymore. Lee, what did you encounter over break?
Right, so I have a friend who's an artist, and she was entering this competition or something about carving a pumpkin, and not just like an American traditional jack-o'-lantern or anything, like a intricate carving or something. And it was her first time doing that, so my mom taught her because she's kind of good at that stuff. And she obviously messed up a few times because it's her first time trying. So we were sort of talking about how is it still like considered art even though she visibly messed up and stuff like that.
Great. So is the question about is it art? Is it pertaining to the one she's turning into the judges? It has errors on it.
Yeah.
Okay. So yes, that is a great question, right? And are the errors a part of the art? Do you think?
I mean, I think they are because it looked good, like it still looked good, and we were talking about how because she was the artist, they wouldn't know that she considered it like a mistake or a mess up. So it was still like a good piece of artwork.
So are there in fact errors then?
There are, and they're sort of noticeable if you know, like if you're sort of experienced in carving.
Right, but what I'm asking is if they are a part of the art, and if they are what makes that art piece unique, different, individualistic, are they in fact errors? I don't know. It's a question to ponder. Dylan, what did you experience?
So I played a lot of baseball over the break, and at one of our practices that we had right before a game, our coaches were just like talking to us or whatever, and they used the frame like some type of phrase. I forget exactly what it was, but it was about like how baseball is like a fine art or something like that. And I remember we are talking about like in the presentations, people were mentioning sports as art. So I don't know, that's kind of reminded me of ToK over break.
Absolutely. What is your verdict on that? Like LeBron James an artist?
I mean, I think so because art does entertain, and the point of sports is entertainment. And there's a lot of things that um, it's more at the professional level because they get paid to do it, obviously. But there's things that professional athletes do to entertain, and like it might not seem very apparent, but there are things that athletes will do, like they'll dress a certain way, they will maybe start fake drama or something. There's stuff like that. Um,
There's
that
certainly some theater to professional sports, is what I hear
yeah,
you say.
for
Right.
sure. Yeah.
So
And then like
why do
and
you
whatnot,
think
stuff
why do
like
you think
that.
it's sort of our national conversation, or at least maybe our subliminal conversation seems to like really like pull these two things apart, right? I'm either an athlete or I'm an artist. Like
I
I'm a
think
jock or I'm a theater kid.
I think because there's a lot because I think it's because sports are literally competition. That's what it is. Like you're competing against other people, and art isn't always seen that way. Obviously, there's like film fests, and as Lee was just talking about, like a art competition. But I think usually art isn't like competing against other people. It's art. It's there for us to like experience, and sports is a little bit different than that because you're competing.
Interesting. That's cool. That's a great way to look at it, especially
And there are errors in sports too.
there are for sure. Some of them, are heartbreaking if you're a fan of the team or the athlete. That's really interesting, Dylan. Thank you. I got a couple more hands up. Looks like Caden has something to toss in. Caden, what do you want to share, brother?
Yeah, so what I noticed over break wasn't necessarily about art. Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead. No, yeah, absolutely.
All right. So my family and I went to California for the week, and one night we had dinner with my dad's boss and his wife. And I don't know them very well, but I do know that they are very wealthy people. And throughout conversation the night, they were way more confident and way more like commanding in conversation, which no one in my family is necessarily shy. So I feel like it wasn't an issue on our part. So that's made me kind of wonder, how does wealth impact someone's mindset?
Yeah, interesting. Do you have any initial thoughts on that?
I mean, like I said, they were really confident and I guess not afraid to put themselves out there, like to share their opinion. So I feel like there's kind of I don't know, maybe an excuse or like maybe if you say something and you're wrong, oh well, I'm still wealthy at the end of the day, something like that.
Do you think it's a possible case of a correlation and not causation? Is it possible that like the confident people are going to be more likely to accumulate wealth because of that confidence rather than rather than the wealth fostering the confidence?
Yeah, I would say there's more correlation and confidence because I don't know obviously like how they acted before. Like I don't really know them that well, but I feel like there's a correlation in that once you have that wealth or like once you are confident, the other will like kind of come in turn, I guess.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Caden. That's an interesting example. It looks like we may have one more, and that is Christian.
Yes. So, one of my favorite things to do is to go read like some scholarly articles, and my one of my favorite poems is by Gertrude Stein, and it's called I "If I Told Him," a completed portrait of Pablo Picasso, and if you're looking at the text, it has no the, the words together make no sense. But her philosophy is that the the words can mean whatever they need to mean. We often associate words with having their dictionary definition rather than their special meaning to us. And so like there's a point where it's like where it starts off, if I told him would he like it, would he like it? If I told him would he like it, would he like it? If I told him, and it doesn't make any sense. And then it goes to talking about shutters. And so I was reading an article on how she was talking about her friend Pablo Picasso in this, but using words that had no connection to him. It was more the way they sounded. It was like, oh, this is talking about an island, or this, but I'm doing a god awful job explaining this, but she would use the sounds of words to try to make you think of think of stuff. And so I was really like, oh shoot. Sometimes I think of a think of, I don't know. I think of a word and I don't necessarily think of. I'm just tied down to its dictionary definition, and I was like, is what she was doing was very complicated art. I don't know. My brain's not my obviously my brain's not been working well, so I'm sorry if I'm not making any sense. But Gertrude Stein was she's got a very different, very interesting approach to epistemology and words in general, and how she was able to um, put that out there in her own special way. I'll just stop talking.
No, no, that sounds like a really interesting example. I'm going to have to investigate it because you're right. Like, and who more fitting to write a deconstructed poem for than an artist who helps sort of deconstruct the, the rules of art, right? Like Picasso did. So, it's a fitting homage to him. So that's a great example, Christian. My example is something that maybe some of the rest of you also shared in. I watched The Social Dilemma with my kids and my wife over break. Raise your hand if you've seen The Social Dilemma yet. Okay, a few of you have. If not, I really recommend watching it if you have Netflix, which I believe that's the platform it's on. But at any rate, it just talks about sort of the philosophy of technology. And what was really interesting for me when I was watching it is that I have a unit designed for ToK that is essentially that hour and a half movie like covers the unit pretty well. So we'll touch base and come back to that because we're actually going to do a unit on technology and philosophy. And it got me thinking, not necessarily about anything new because I've been thinking about these issues for a while, but there's a lot of interesting statistics and data in it that was really eye-opening for me. So if you have any interest in sort of philosophy and technology, I certainly recommend The Social Dilemma. All right, cool. At this point, I am going to share my screen and would recommend that if you don't already have your reflection journal open to take some notes, it might be a great idea to do that now. Again, it's not that any of this is going to be on the test, quote unquote, that you're going to need to have memorized. But I do think that some of the ideas that come from the videos are great to include in your notes about the arts so that next year, when you get ready to do your presentation and write your essay for your ToK assessment, you can go back to your art section and pull some ideas from there. Some recommendations of things that you might want to look at. Okay, so first of all, let's take a look at the first video, which was a Crash Course Philosophy video. And I'm a huge fan of the Crash Course folks. And I mean, it's not perfect, I realize, but they do a really good job, I think. And the first thing I want to make sure that you know is that the philosophy of beauty or artistic judgment has a name, right? That branch of philosophy has a name, and it's aesthetics. Hank also calls it value theory, and that works as well. But when you hear people talk about aesthetic judgments, what they're really asking is, about the philosophical underpinnings of how we're defining beauty in that particular moment. And again, many of you probably already know that word and are fluent with it, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew what that was. This unit is kind of all centered on the idea of aesthetic judgments. He mentions that there's a philosopher, Hume, a Scottish philosopher who asked us to draw a distinction between two questions. Do I like it? And is it good? And this probably is not an uncommon distinction for most of us, right? We all have guilty pleasure art, things that we love to watch, listen to, eat, experience, that we know isn't really great capital A art. So, my examples include movies such as The Predator, classic Arnold Schwarzenegger, or Bloodsport, classic Jean-Claude Van Damme. I know I'm definitely dating myself from the 80s here, but two guilty pleasure movies that I really love to watch, but there's no way I would try and defend for you that it's great art. The way that I would one of my other favorite films, which is No Country for Old Men, another film that I absolutely adore. And I could write pages for you on why I think that that is a great piece of art, and I have the critics to support that. So Hume is asking us to think about that distinction. Additionally, the video asks us to think about, are there objective measures of beauty? That's always a great question to ask. I think we can find evidence to support the fact that there aren't objective measures of beauty. I'm sure you've been in a conversation with a loved one, a friend, or a family member where you said, oh my gosh, I think that X, Y, or Z is so beautiful or attractive, be it a person or a car, or, I don't know, whatever, an outfit. And the person you're with are like, are you crazy? That person's not attractive. That's not my type. Or I think that outfit looks hideous. Or that's the worst looking car I've ever seen. So there's definitely evidence that there's not much objectivity to beauty, but we also seem to find evidence sometimes that there is, right? There are certain things that humans tend to find attractive, right? Certain proportions, right? Images of health and beauty as opposed to death and decay. So while maybe there aren't like a certain set of objective rules for the arts and what measures beauty, we might be able to find some examples where there are tendencies. And another thing to think about is how interesting it is to think about the cultural differences in our measures of beauty. The way different cultures find, whether it's different body types attractive, or whether different cultures find different musical scales to be appealing. I'm sure Christian and some of you that are involved in music might be able to talk more explicitly about that. But, I know that, in for example, Eastern cultures, there are different tonal scales than we have in the West. So, it's interesting to think about the role culture plays in those measures of beauty. The video asks us to think about art objects versus objects of natural beauty. And I would like to encourage you to think about when and where that distinction is valid. So the video asks you to think about an art object as being something that's intentionally created by an artist, like a vase, a painting, right, a sonnet. Whereas objects of natural beauty are those things that we just find in nature, right? Like a beautiful sunset over, a calm ocean. The video also thinks us to think about this word ontology, which is just a fancy word for where something comes from or where it begins. And the ontology of art asks us to think, in what ways does an artist's intention matter when we're evaluating art? Does it matter that the artist's intention was to, critique the president? Does it matter that the artist's intention was to make you feel melancholy? Does it matter that the artist's intention was to bring you joy? If you still appreciate the art, but it doesn't bring you joy or make you feel melancholy, or, you love the president and you don't want to critique him, does it matter that the artist's intentions were there? Okay, before I go on to the next slide, does anybody that watched that video have anything they want to add to that conversation, or any comments they want to toss in there? All right, looks like everybody's good. All right, cool. The second video was shorter, and it just asked us to consider this idea of the intention fallacy. And what this is really, again, getting into is this idea of, is it important for you to understand the intention of the artist? And, it's a great question, because there are obviously certain instances in which we'll never know the intention of the artist. You know, the artist is dead and gone, or the artist refuses to discuss their intentions. So it was, again, just amplifying this conversation about, you know, should it matter? Is the intention of the artist even relevant at all in our appreciation of the art? The third one was also Crash Course Philosophy video. And this one asked, is art good for us or bad for us at the beginning? And it contrasts two different philosophers and their opinions on art. Plato, who thought art was terrible for us. Did anybody watch the video? Do you remember why Plato thought art was terrible for us? Plato wanted to live in a world without art. Why? Seems like a radical position. Scanning really quickly. Oh yeah, wait, hold on. I saw a hand. Charlotte, do you remember?
I didn't watch the video, but wasn't it supposed to be that Plato believed that art would distract us from philosophy?
Very close. We'll give you a gold star for that one. Yeah, the distraction part is right. Plato's very concerned with discovering what is real, you know, in the capital R sense, and he thought that art distracted us from our ability to perceive what was real and what was imitation. Aristotle, on the other hand, thought art was great, and his argument for this rests on this idea of the problem of tragedy. Did anybody that watched the third video remember what the problem of tragedy is? It's a couple weeks ago, so it's all right. So the problem of tragedy is this. Why would you spend your hard-earned money to make yourself miserable, right? To go into a movie that's going to make you cry, to watch a film that's going to make you have nightmares, to read a story that's going to upset you. We do this all the time. We subject ourselves to artwork that makes us feel, you know, unappealing emotions. And Aristotle's answer was that it provides us with a sense of catharsis, right? It allows us to expel emotions in a healthy way. So maybe some of you are like me, and there are times when you just are feeling a certain type of way, and you put on that certain playlist, and you know, you have a good cry, because at the end of it, you're gonna feel a little bit better, you know, or whatever, right? These pieces of art can help us purge these emotions that we're feeling. At least that was Aristotle's argument. All right, sweet. He also talks about the paradox of fiction, which is that, and I'm sorry, Hank Green talks about the paradox of fiction in this video, and whether or not the emotions that we feel from art, like when we do cry at our favorite part in a movie, are we really feeling the same sadness that we feel, you know, when a family member dies or our beloved pet? And there could be an argument made that it's not, right? There seems to be this sort of superficial or faux emotion that we feel when we're interacting with art that is different maybe than real emotion that we have when we're dealing with the real world. But maybe not. Maybe for some of us, the line between those two worlds is blurred. Hank encouraged us to think about the difference between amusement art and magic art. And amusement art is, you know, probably, you know, The Predator for me, or probably Bloodsport for me, right? It's art that's just there to distract us and amuse us and keep us entertained. Whereas magic art is that art that is designed to, you know, make us think deep and meaningful thoughts about the universe and the world around us. Hank points out that that distinction might really be invalid. It could be the case that for some of you, right, a movie that I find to be frivolous and just entertainment only for you has deep and you know, important meaning. So he encouraged you to think about the usefulness or the validity of that distinction between magic and magic art and amusement art. And then lastly, he talks about this idea of autonomist versus moralist perspectives on art. And an autonomist, they believe that, you know, art and morality is divorced from one another. So, you know, it doesn't matter that the artist is a racist, right? You can still appreciate their art. It doesn't matter that the artist committed some crime, right? You can still appreciate the art. Moralists, on the other hand, believe that there is a strong connection between the art and morals, ethics. So I don't know how you feel about that. You know, we live in a moment, in a time, in a place where, you know, some people say there's an abundance of the cancel culture, right? Where we have all kinds of artists who have produced great works of art, but then, you know, run afoul of some position, and some number of us clamor for them to be relegated to the dustbin of history. And others say no. You know, I can still appreciate the artistry of Michael Jackson, even though, you know, I know what he may have done. Or I can still appreciate the artistry of oh my God, I'm spacing on J.K. Rowling, right? Even though she's been accused of having this position or that. So it's a good conversation or debate to have. And then the last one was a School of Life video. And this asked you to think about the history of art primarily. And in this one, it kind of talked about how art used to be there to support the truths of society. So whether that's religion or government, the purpose of art seemed to be just to instruct people on what to believe, to reinforce social order, that kind of thing. And then over time that changed. It became a propaganda more generally for the powerful. So divorced of just religion or government, if you had great wealth, you could use art as a way to solidify your image, your reputation, your prestige. And then there was this movement to the creation of art just for the sake of art itself. L'art pour l'art, you know, just art for art's sake. And this was Marcel Duchamp, you know, one of the artists that I named your teams for. You know, he asked us to think about questions like, you know, why should art be easy to understand? Is it the obligation of the artist to make art that it's easy for the artist to understand, or is the artist's role there to stand outside of society and to challenge it, to make it difficult? You know, does art have to mean something? Can I create a piece of art that is meaningless, devoid of meaning? Does art have to stand for something? Do pieces of art need to somehow have an agenda or a message that is intended to, you know, propel a discussion forward? And as I mentioned, should the artist be on the outside looking in? And I think when you think about many of the great artists that we admire, in many cases, they do come from that position of being on the outside of whatever culture group that they're in. And that helps propel their art to some degree. All right, so I tossed a lot out there at you. Does anyone have a comment on any of those questions about the morality of art, or about you know, whether art needs to stand for something? Yeah, Caden, what do you want to toss in, my friend?
Can you elaborate more on what you just mentioned, an artist on the outside looking in? Like, what are they on the outside of? Like, where are they excluded from?
Yeah, it's a great question. So you can imagine that exclusion coming from a variety of sources, right? So, you know, it might be political exclusion, right? It might be religious exclusion. It might be racial or gender exclusion. So is it the role of the artist in many cases to stand outside of what society deems as proper and to provide some critique of that? You know, when you take a look at sort of the notion of like artist colonies, right? Why do artists create artist colonies? Well, they physically oftentimes move places that are away from, you know, normal society, so that they can be free to experiment with their art. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Anybody else want to jump in? Okay. All right. Looking good. Scanning the crowd. Okay, fantastic. All right. In that case, what I'd like us to do next, if you'd be so kind, is to go into Canvas. And you should find a new assignment in our art unit, our art module. Called The Value of Art. And hopefully it will allow you to make a copy of the document. There we go. All right, so John, I don't remember how our conversation got started yesterday about government funding the arts. Do you remember?
I think it started because I was talking about like break, and then I started talking about like what I did over break, and then so we started talking about like the arts from that.
Yeah, all right, right on. So I've had this conversation with my ToK students before, but I decided to sort of modify it a little bit. So these are generally true statistics that you've got here at the top. The current budget for the National Endowment for the Arts, which is the federal government's major arts support organization, is approximately $150 million per year. Okay? That's about, what, 0.005% of the national budget. To give you some perspective, we spend about 4,000 times that much on the military, about 600 billion per year, and about 6,600 times that much on Medicare and Medicaid, nearly $1 trillion. So I've created, or I didn't create, but I've listed some categories that the government currently funds below, everything from national defense all the way down to paying down the national debt. And what I'm interested in having you do is put some percentages on the document of how much of our national budget you think should go to these categories of expenditure. So for example, if you think the United States should spend 25% of its federal budget on national defense, you'd put a 25% there, all right? Now, of course, the one I'm really interested in seeing what you do with is right here, the arts, okay? So you can see what our current budget is, all right? And so what I'm really interested in seeing is what you put here, because we're in an art unit, but in order for you to think practically about what we should spend on the arts, I thought I would get you thinking about all the other kinds of things the government needs to fund. And then there are two questions here at the bottom. What are arguments for promoting or increasing government funding in the arts? What are arguments against promoting or increasing government funding in the arts? So again, this doesn't need to be long, just a couple sentences is fine. I'll give you guys right now, we're at 2:18. So we'll take about, let's go with about 7 or 8 minutes for you to work on this worksheet and to jot some stuff down, and then we'll come back together and see what you guys think. Cool? All right, awesome. Well, you can mute your screen while you work if you want, or just hang out there, whatever works for you, and we'll come back together at about 2:25. All right, who wants to get us started? How much did you decide to give to the arts, if any? And And what were some of your other biggest categories?
Do you know if I start?
Yeah, go for it, John.
So the area which I actually ended up giving the most money to was 18% to education, uh, because, uh, and I actually only gave 1% to the arts because I think the most important aspect of like spending the money should go to education because I think through education you can learn how to express yourself in a better manner, in a like more like profound manner. So, and not only that, but you can be able to learn more things, and that's kind of why I also put a lot. I put 8% into scientific research as well, because I think learning is probably the most important thing to bolster all areas within the list.
Yep, awesome, man. Appreciate it. So education and scientific discovery, even a 1% allocation to the arts is a huge increase in arts funding, given that right now they're at like, what was that, 5,000th of a percent? So 1% is a huge increase. One of my math folks can figure out what kind of increase that is. Abby, what do you want to add?
Oh, I just wanted to add that I give 2% to the arts, so basically the same idea. And my reasoning was that I wanted more percent to go into like helping the needy and like helping homeless.
Awesome. So in those categories for providing food and housing for the poor, you had relatively high percentages there.
Yeah.
How much did you put for national defense, just out of curiosity?
I put 4%.
4%? Okay, cool. Price, what do you think, man?
All right, so I put 0.5% for the arts because I actually did the math to figure out how much it was, and that's $1.5 billion. So that's way more than 150 million. But I just saw other categories such as education and the development of pharmaceuticals and medicines, especially nowadays. Scientific research, disaster relief, all those just seem more important to America as a whole, and for like the survival rather than entertainment.
Interesting. So yeah, as we face COVID and climate change, being able to protect the citizenry is a primary responsibility of the federal government, you feel? Yeah. Cool. Thank you, Price. I appreciate it. Isaac, what did you want to add?
One of the things that I sort of thought would be like priority would be like making sure everyone has what they need and making sure everyone's safe. I think that at least I think that should be put first. Then we can get into like scientific research, investigate, prosecute criminal activity. But for the arts and the space program, I just put 1% because I don't really think that I don't think that well first space program in particular, I just don't think it's too important at the moment. In the arts, because I think it's more. I think it's more so something that would be better if the government wasn't involved in the arts, because a lot of the time, as we can see through history, though these are certain times, it can often turn to like propaganda to support the government itself if they're constantly funding the arts.
That's
So I think
Yeah, no,
yeah.
that's really interesting, Isaac. In fact, that you're anticipating sort of my next question, which is great. So you're kind of skeptical about the government's role in funding the arts just generally.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, man. I appreciate it. Thank you, Isaac. Christian?
By no means should be in charge of our nation's treasury, but I allocated 4.8% to the arts because I personally believe that the arts, they're manifested in um, other areas. You can't. I mean, you could argue that some nations' militaries are very founded. Like say Israel, what's it called? It's like Krav Maga. It's a martial art, and they use that in their military battle. And so the arts is such a broad spectrum that it's in natural defense. It's in education, and scientists are even somewhat artists, and the space programs are architects. It's everywhere. So having that as a base is very important because it manifests itself. Um, I also think that I wouldn't be doing this diploma program if it weren't for the arts because it's let me ask questions and fostered a love for learning rather than just a love for getting good grades, and that's something that's different between us and the developed nations in Europe is that they encourage education and they have it at a more affordable rate. And it's a lot of because these arts institutions they raise them young. They have these. Uh, I'm kind of rambling right now, so I'm gonna stop talking. But I think yes, it manifests itself in many different areas that we don't obviously see all the time.
Yeah, in fact, I want to grab a book off my bookshelf in just a second that sort of talks about this issue you raised, Christian, which is really good. Lee, but before I grab a book, I want to hear from Lee. Lee, what do you think?
I said one of my biggest categories was paying down national debt because like the description says that we spend approximately 600 billion per year on like the military. And although the military is very necessary, obviously, I feel like that's not like a top priority. Like we're in an extreme amount of debt. And if we put that much money into like getting ourselves out of debt, we could be like just much better as an economy as a whole. So I said like national debt should be like, or national defense should be like 10%, and the arts was raised a little bit to like 0.5%, but everything else is pretty much evenly spread.
Okay, thank you, Lee. So yeah, you're putting a big premium on paying down the national debt because you believe that money could then be plowed into other endeavors, right? Okay, let me grab a book off my bookshelf. I'll be right back. Okay, here it is. Here it is. So this book is kind of making an argument that's tangential to the one Christian's making. And in this book, the author Daniel Pink, I don't know, has anybody read this book? You may have had to read this in middle school or in like freshman English or something. I don't know. It's called A Whole New Mind. But in this, the author makes the claim that what we really should be teaching you guys in school is a heavier balance of aesthetic appreciation. We should be teaching you more about the arts. And his reason for making that argument is that he believes the jobs of the future are going to be in design. And the jobs of the future are going to be in places where aesthetic judgment is paramount. So, all right. I want to thank Abby and Lee and Dylan and Caden and Christian and John and Abby and Price and Isaac. I hope I didn't forget anyone. If I did, I apologize. But thanks for your participation today. You have only one homework assignment to do, and that's only if you care to do it. If you would shoot me a remind text and let me know one of these two things. I'm done with art. Let's move on. We've covered it. I'm bored. Let's find a new topic. Or I still have interesting things to discuss in the arts. Let's keep going. So I want a student poll. Are we ready to move on? Or do we want to talk more about the arts? Let me know and remind. All right. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Peace.
All right, you guys can go first. I missed out like on a whole month of school, so I can talk last.
Mr. Hodson. So
Yeah.
basically, so over fall break, I was watching Naruto. It's an anime with my sisters, and I already watched it, and I'm just rewatching it with them. But when we're talking about art, it reminded me of a character named Deidara, and he's like a big art guy. He loves art, and basically, well, it's a fighting show, so everyone has like their own unique abilities where they kill people and stuff. But he loves art, and his philosophy on art is that art is most beautiful when you first see it, like in the first few moments of its like finishing and like final creation. And so that's what, and he like sculpts stuff, and that's like his main thing. He sculpts things, and he like says, "This is art. It's beautiful." And like once he's done with it, like within the first few seconds, he turns his clay like sculptures into bombs. That's his like weapon thing. And I just wanted to share with that, like that's his philosophy. Like he only thinks that art is worth being seen by others in its first few moments, and then should be trashed.
Yeah, to what extent do you agree or disagree with that position?
I mean, I mostly disagree because I feel like art should be preserved, and it's like it has a lot of story and background to it, like the preserved history and meaning. But I also see his point that like because I can imagine putting myself in his shoes, like seeing a piece of art and like some type of form of expression the first time, like it like brings so many ideas, and after that, the more you think about it or the more comfortable you get to it, I feel like it's kind of losing its meaning. At the same time, not, but I don't know.
It's complicated, right? Like there's some pieces
Yeah.
of art that you're right, the more you look at it, the less interesting it is. And there are other pieces of art that are more interesting the more you look at it. And I think that's one of the conversations that was happening in one of the crash course philosophy art videos, where Hank was talking about how if you become a connoisseur of that art, if you know more about the art, then you're able to appreciate deeper and deeper levels to it.
Yeah.
Rather than if you don't really know anything, if I don't really know anything about anime, which I don't, then when I see anime, I'm like, oh, that's cool. And after 30 seconds, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to move on. But if I'm a student of anime, if I know, all the culture of it and, how it's supposed to operate and work, then I can see like novel uses of characters or, interesting techniques in drawing that someone who doesn't really understand the art would just kind of miss.
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
That's what I wanted to say for today, but yeah.
Couldn't you argue that really, really good anime still has enough that someone who doesn't really understand the deep stuff of anime can still like enjoy and appreciate it? Like I've seen very intricate anime. There's that one scene from One Punch Man where it's a cool fight scene and everything's really well animated and the explosions look realistic. But like, and you could get into the deep animation details of how they did it on single frame instead of double frame animation and how everything's so well posed and how they can sometimes break the lines to make it look more dynamic. Or you can just look at it like a regular observer and be like, wow, that's a cool fight scene. And you can still enjoy it and feel the awesomeness of it even without all the stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I think you're absolutely right. There are different layers to which you can still appreciate things, for sure, Charlotte. All right, guys. Well, I have to catch up with Christian because he missed a bunch of school. So as much as I hate to shoo you away, he and I have kind of have an appointment to get caught up, okay?
All right.
I love you, though. Great to see you.
See ya.
All right, peace.
Shots and